You can tell the mic's working with my walk up. There we go. Alrighty. Well, hello everybody. My name is Tyler Kaplan. I'm the Director of Platform Solutions at Billups, which is really a fancy way of saying whenever there's data conversations with either our brands or advertisers, I'm usually at the table kind of talking about our capabilities and solutions. So today we've got our subject going to be optimizing out of home using the OOH. I wish I could take credit for this one, but that's really my marketing team that thought of that kind of cute name for optimizing advertising. So just in terms of today's session, the things that I'm going to be going over are a little bit of a recap of some of the technology that we deploy even in this current phase for our brands and advertisers in the vein of measurement. But what I'm also going to be talking about is a little bit more into the future of deviceless solutions. I think for years now we've been hearing about Google speaking to the deprecation of cookies, and it's been a can that's been kicked repeatedly. But if we're looking at it now from the perspective of we've had years to really recoup the space and see what we can do, I'm going to be speaking towards how we can blend a few of the sort of old school and new school attribution pieces. I'm also going to be speaking a little bit towards sustainable initiatives. I've got about 20 minutes, so I want to make sure that this is jam-packed with information as it relates to attention, but also how you can really bring a little bit more life to your out-of-home campaigns. So just to recap of who we are, we're Billups. I'm sure everybody here has heard of out-of-home or OOH before, but it really is the reference to anything and everything under the sun as it's outside of your home. So just an example of some of the work that we've done here, whether you're looking for either traditional or static placements, or you're looking to place your logo onto a sailboat. You can get in touch with myself or my colleague Greg Taylor, who's here with me as well, doing an awesome job as the paparazzi back there, giving me a hand. So for Bill's vision, what we really wanted to do, at least in terms of putting our name out into the market, it's really to reinvent out of home for the digital and performance age. So, historically I've been in conversations with advertisers who might look at out of home as perhaps maybe that offline channel or maybe a little more antiquated. At Billups, what we really want to do is bring that a little bit more to the digital economy and place it at the forefront of channel selection strategies. So that way it's not necessarily the channel that sticks out, but it's really the channel that can be pulled into your mix for attribution. So with that, we really aim to create an accessible and accountable environment for out of home. So what this is really looking to do is to keep advertisers close to any sort of out of home formats and mediums, but also to evaluate it with expedition in mind. Taking a look at out of home units and being able to score different sort of criteria points can help out advertisers when they're making decisions for the next cycle of purchase. So really, I'm going to be going through a couple pieces of technology and our methodologies to get us to really keep put our money where our mouth is when we're interfacing with our advertisers. So within here, the two areas that we focus on to really kind of answer some of the questions that our advertisers bring in the out-of-home space, we really focus on these two key areas. That's going to be the proprietary technology that we can develop in-house. So this includes not only the patented technology, but also the algorithms that fuel some of our attention mapping patterns. We also have very strong data partnerships that consider the global scale of what we're trying to do. So I bring that up because data and privacy, I'm really jazzed because I was looking at the docket for some of the material tomorrow. And I'm seeing that some of the subject matter is going to be speaking towards data privacy and regulations in the space. So I'm really excited that advertisers are starting to get a little bit more privy to really staying compliant with any data regulations. So I'll be speaking a little bit towards those privacy considerations in a little bit. But I did start with the proprietary technology, and this is something that I wanted to show everybody, not only from a perspective of maybe you're an out-of-home advertiser, but maybe you also want to have an interesting water cooler conversation with one of your colleagues. So I like to start off here, and so you all know too, this is blurred on purpose, so if you think that your vision's a little bit not up to snuff, that's all done intentionally. But I have this visual here to show everybody really the way that the human visual processing works, or human visual processing system works. So we're very heavily working within the out-of-home space. It's a physical channel that everybody's going to be right in front of that placement. There are different ways to evaluate a physical medium, particularly within how users can see this. So if I hit play on this visual, you're actually going to see this video sort of unblur from a perspective of the hierarchy in which your brain would notice certain elements in the scene. So I'm going to take this back one more time and hit play so you can see really how this unblurs in this prioritization of different things, or different elements in a given scene. So this is one of my favorite areas. This is the Las Vegas Strip. And you can think about this from a perspective of you walked out of your hotel room, you rubbed your eyes, and you're looking at this scene with a bunch of different elements that your attention might gravitate towards. And based on the composition of the scene, you might notice different areas based off of how frequently that color pops up, or how bright it is compared to the rest of that scene. So if I hit play one more time, you can see in the dead center of this, there's these red umbrellas that sort of stick out from the rest of the immediate areas. When I hit play, you can actually see that red umbrella. It's going to be one of the first things that come into view. And the reason for that is really because that red has enough information to stick out from the rest of the scene. You could think of this if you're at a party, for example, and everybody's wearing a black hat. If somebody else walks in wearing a black hat, you're not likely to look away and plot your attention towards that new individual that walked in the room. But if somebody walks in and they're wearing a pink hat, and that pink hat has enough contrast from the other black hats around it, you're a lot more likely to notice that individual walking in, and your attention might go towards them rather than another area that you'll see frequently. And if I play this one more time, there's actually one other thing that you can notice that comes into view last. It's actually these beige buildings I want to bring your attention towards. If I hit play, any sort of area in the back, like that beige that you can see comes up very frequently, that's one of the last areas that's going to be noticed by the human visual processing system. So you can think of this as like if you've ever been on a long drive, if anyone here has ever done the Texas drive where it's maybe about 10% land and about 90% blue sky. Do you notice every single idiosyncrasy across the sky? The answer is no, because that's taking up half of your purview. And your brain knows that it can sort of tune out certain elements like the sky, so it can pay attention to the more immediate surroundings that might have more visual contrast to those elements. So that's really how we can look at and approach the human visual processing system. And the way that this works into an out-of-home scene is it lets us evaluate this with a lot more of a scientific approach rather than a feeling. So what we can do is we can take information theory from those previous principles that I brought up and bring it into any kind of out-of-home environment. So in this example here, you can actually see in this top left here, there's an out-of-home place, but that's exactly right there positioned above the skyline. And on this bottom visual here, that's us evaluating how likely certain areas are to grab that attention. And if you remember that example I brought up before with the sky, you can see that that's the area that's in the darkest blue, or what we categorize as low attention. And that's because, again, your brain is more likely to fill those parts in. It's not going to pay attention to all the idiosyncrasies, whereas when you can see that there's a visual distinction across a certain area or certain pixels, our model can assign an attention index to those specific areas. So in this example here, just to kind of put a bow on how this functions and how it trickles out into the out-of-home environment, if I were to show you this top visual on the top left, showed it to you for maybe 10 seconds, and then I took it away and said, all right, I need you all to draw this from memory. What your drawing is going to look like is that bottom visual if we filter to the brightest yellow, because those are all the areas that are going to stick out the most to your brain. It's what you're going to take away from that environment. So this is really how we can get into scoring out-of-home scenes. We use various digital imagery from Google street-level images all the way to mapillary data. Because we really want to take digital imagery and recreate the world using this human visual processing system. So this is really one of the ways that we can evaluate our out-of-home scenes and really populate this into a more forward-thinking product. So in this visual here, this is actually something that if anybody who was in attendance last year, we did have a little bit of a light discussion about our attention metrics and the dashboard that comes with it. And you can see here, this is something that we wanted to do to, again, put my money where my mouth is in terms of keeping out-of-home accessible and accountable. So this is not only where you can see where your inventory is occurring, but you can also determine how much attention certain boards are garnering over others. So really, this is an evaluative metric to compare out-of-home inventory, but also keeping your thumb on the pulse in terms of what's happening within the market. So if I hit play on here again, you can also see some of the other elements that we've included in our dashboard, things like the reach or the frequency, things like that that are a little bit more familiar to advertisers across other channels like television or radio, which reach frequency is heavily considered. We wanted to be able to provide the same kind of metrics in an out-of-home environment, really using a lot of those strong data partnerships that I had mentioned before. So the way that the process works in terms of grouping all the out-of-home placements into our dashboard, what we'll do is use that same technology that I pulled up before to really define where the field of view ends and begins for the user. And that's really what we coin as view sheds. These represent where the users can see our placements. And those are passed outward from each piece of out-of-home inventory, and it serves as a net to really evaluate the device inputs that are happening in that view shed. And that's where mobile device data comes in to really represent where the user is within the marketplace. You know, this first question, or this first piece of tech that we have really answers where's our out-of-home inventory. The mobile device data comes in to answer where our users in proximity to that out-of-home inventory. And that's where we can get to work in terms of evaluating how boards are reaching individuals in market, how much of the marketplace is reached. If we, for example, know there's 20 million devices will be exposed to 5 million unique, we can get a little bit of a better understanding of our reach and frequency metrics in the marketplace. This wasn't necessarily something that was available about 20 or 30 years ago when some of the technology wasn't necessarily up to speed with some of our evaluation metrics. And the last thing that we do is really store and distill any kind of out-of-home placements into that attention index, so we can really sort of identify which pieces of inventory are seeing a bit more of a premium activity over others. Now, I did mention too before that I was really excited to see some of the data privacy conversations that are going to be within this conference too, because I did mention mobile device data, and that's really one of the big signals for data privacy. Everybody has probably seen some form of cookie tracking, or maybe you've declined the cookies when you've gone onto a website. So mobile device data is very much at the forefront of consumer data protection. And it's really even being noticed by both the advertiser and consumer now too. 93% of adults actually consider that they really want to have more, 93% of adults say that they want to have control over the data that brands and advertisers have across them. So we're starting to see that a little bit more in the marketplace too, that consumers want a bit more control in here too. Almost half of adults think that no data should be stored. So any sort of historical data that's kept on users, a lot of adults are saying that that's not something that they want to be incumbent upon their data. And we're even seeing this too across the industry itself, as it's evidenced by these countries, by different countries and nations implementing privacy regulations. I think I put this deck together a few weeks ago, and this 107 number is even higher now in terms of placing regulations. So it's really going to show that a lot of nations are kind of pinpointing how much they should really care about privacy and protecting the consumer as well. So with that, I am going to speak just really briefly in these final 5 minutes just about the privacy compliant measurement that we can deploy to really bring in some of these kind of old school methodologies, things that have been rooted across data science for the past 20 or 30 years as it relates to attribution. And if you really do take into consideration the innovation, but also kind of the expertise from some of the methodologies we've deployed before, it's really kind of improving and innovating the space through both experience and looking ahead. So just one of the first areas in terms of privacy compliant measurement that can be deployed, especially within out-of-home, is our causal impact model. So this is executed through historic data and various control and treated markets. So the way that we would deploy a causal impact model would be, for example, if I'm running an out-of-home campaign in Los Angeles and I want to understand what kind of lift happened in that market. What I would do is I would build a predictive baseline to really see what would have happened had out-of-home never deployed. And that predictive baseline is going to be built off of different control markets that are very similar to Los Angeles but aren't executing, in this instance, out-of-home. So I might look at Los Angeles, but I'll collect the data from perhaps San Francisco, Dallas, New York, Boston. So I can really predict what's going to happen had we never deployed any sort of out-of-home. And when we sort of overlay any actual data on top of that, we can parse out incremental activity isolated to an individual channel. But what I really want to kind of drill home within this slide too is the importance of first-party data and historic data. That was actually something that a lot of brands and advertisers got right when Google was going to, when Google announced the deprecation of cookies. A lot of brands and advertisers said, you know what, we have to really polish up our first-party data because that's going to have a little bit more of an indicator compared to cookies. And that's actually evident within here as we're kind of looking at data that goes all the way back to 6/1/23. So just kind of an example of how holding on to that first party data is going to be very important for strong decision making as it relates to a causal impact model. And if anybody's ever dabbled a little bit more into media mix modeling, something that's a little bit more premium as compared to other attribution solutions, media mix modeling really takes in amalgamation of different channels. So that includes maybe out of home, television, radio, digital. And what media mix modeling does is it identifies the relationship between any sales point or KPI with channel spend. So this is a way that advertisers can get a little bit more of an unbiased look to really identify how each channel lifts a certain area over another. So within this is a little bit more of a sophisticated operation. If you are looking to get a media mix model going, there's probably going to be a very extensive kickoff, a very sort of stringent data review. But media mix modeling is a very strong and privacy compliant way to understand how your business or how your brand really scales with different sort of channel applications. So a very strong tool that has been deployed for quite some time now. Now, as I'm kind of bringing this up too, as it relates to data privacy, all these solutions are looking at things that more in aggregate. So the more that you can pull in aggregate numbers, the more you're staying away from any sort of one-to-one device targeting. So mobile ad IDs or any sort of cookies or identifiers might have a little bit of a harder time matching to any other event. And that's where we can also look at the audience cohort analysis, which brings a little bit more of grouping together audiences on common identifiers. So audience cohort segmentation is another way that you can remain privacy compliant, provided that you are encrypting your data and placing devices accordingly into like-minded devices. So you might look at different cohorts and see that one cohort is performing above another. And this allows you to build different control audiences off of those cohort groups too. So really, I wanted to kind of end on the cohort analysis as it relates to data privacy because it really shows how aggregating some of these audiences, while it's a little bit of a step back, this is something that was deployed maybe 20, 25 years ago when these mobile solutions weren't available. But you can kind of see how you can really bring these older solutions to the forefront mixed with some of the more innovative solutions like our attention metrics. You know, it's not necessarily something that we are taking a step back to move forward, but we're really taking our expertise from all of those areas before and bringing in innovative solutions to really put a bow on this full analysis in the out-of-home environment. So just a few ways that you can look at deviceless solutions as it's related to measurements, not only within the out-of-home environment, but even some of the other more traditional placements as well. So just in terms of some of the takeaways to give everybody here, if you wanted to chat with any of these things with myself or my colleague Greg Taylor, a few of the takeaways, eyes are on attention right now as it relates to out-of-home, but also in other environments too. I was doing a little bit of desktop research not too long ago, and some vendors like Adelaide, for example, are even looking at attention in a digital environment too. So it's really a way to add a more qualitative metric outside of quantitative. For privacy compliant solutions, you can think first-party data is going to be king, and reviewing audiences in aggregate is really going to protect a lot of advertisers for privacy and scale. So within this tech stack, I think it's important too to consider when you are working with any attribution provider, see if they're adherent to all these different sort of principles and regulations, because it's really going to keep us at the forefront for privacy compliance. And the last thing I want to bring up here too is really the notion for marketers and looking ahead. In the advertising vertical, the advertisers that see success are the ones that can predict innovation. If you're acting upon something that was innovated 3 years ago, you're already late to the party. So one of the things I wanted to kind of bring up as top of mind is the corporate social responsibility. I brought up before that a lot of brands and advertisers and consumers alike are being privy to any sort of data regulations or data privacy concerns. So in that vein, one of the things to consider is the corporate social responsibility. What are corporations and what are brands and advertisers doing to protect privacy and privacy compliance? And outside of corporate social responsibility, that truncates into a few things like, for example, sustainability. Are brands and advertisers able to give back to or are agencies able to give back to their brands and advertisers and really implement different regulations to make sure that you're adherent to any corporate social responsibility as well. So something to consider and keep in mind. I'm not saying I have all the answers for innovation, but one of the things to consider is corporate social responsibility in the future and how you can bring that to the forefront of your measurement solutions as well. And that is everything that I have that I wanted to cover. Thank you so much, everybody, for your time. Again, we're with Billups. Always excited to be sponsoring these events. And if anybody wants to chat, I'll be around. But thank you so much.